Okay, so good afternoon and welcome everyone. Before we get started, we want to mention some important reminders. So today's webinar is being recorded and will be made available to the public for viewing on demand. And by joining the webinar, you are automatically consenting to such recordings. So if you do not wish to have your voice recorded, please do not speak during the session. All attendee microphones have been muted to eliminate any background noise, and you may include your questions in the chat box. We will save all questions until the end of the session. Closed captioning and a sign language interpreter are available for today's session. You can find and click closed captioning at the bottom of your screen. And for the sign language interpreter, you can find the sign language interpreter's video tile, right-click, and choose Pin Video. For technical issues, please include a message in the chat box that is being monitored by Mr. Mallory. So again, we're glad that you've joined us for today's session. It is session 2 in the WVABLE Workshop series that is hosted by Disability Rights of West Virginia and West Virginia Developmental Disabilities Councils. And today's session is titled, How to Use Your Stable Account. So for those of you that are not familiar with WVABLE, it's a savings and investment account program that allows individuals with disabilities to save and invest while protecting their eligibility for public benefit programs such as SSI and Medicaid. During today's workshop, we will start off with a brief overview of the WVABLE Savings Program, followed by a walkthrough of the online dashboard. You will learn how to make contributions and withdrawals, how to add a bank account for making electronic funds transfers, and additional features and tips will be shared that will help to make using your online account easy. So your presenters for today's webinar will be myself, Roxanne Clay. I am with the West Virginia State Treasurer's Office and the Director of the WVABLE Savings Program, which stands for Achieving a Better Life Experience in West Virginia, and Thomas Hatch. Tom is the Accounts Operations Manager for Stable Accounts Program. And also please welcome Roy Mallory with Disability Rights of West Virginia, who will be monitoring our chat box and providing technical support for our webinar. So during this portion of the webinar, I will be providing you a brief and very high-level overview of the WVABLE program. So for anyone that has not participated in our standard WVABLE presentation and you want to learn more about the program, I highly encourage that you attend one of our recurring webinars. They're an hour long and we cover program information in more detail. I also go into more detail about special considerations and benefits that are important for individuals and families to know and to understand. And then on this slide, you see a screenshot of WVABLE.com. If you have an additional monitor or your smartphone, feel free to take a quick look at WVABLE.com, as I'll be referring to the site throughout. The website is where you can go to learn more information about what I'm sharing with you today. And then this is also where you go to find the link to the dates for the upcoming WVABLE webinars. This is also where enrollment in a WVABLE account begins. So what is WVABLE? It is West Virginia's ABLE plan and is based on federal legislation called the ABLE Act that was passed in 2014. It's included in the Internal Revenue Code as a new section, 529A. The bill created savings and investment accounts for individuals with disabilities. So money that is deposited into these accounts do not affect eligibility for public benefit programs such as SSI and Medicaid. The ABLE Act also gave states the mechanism to create their own ABLE program. The ABLE Act does not mandate that we have a program, so we do feel fortunate to have this program in West Virginia. Our program launched in February of 2018, so we just celebrated our 3-year anniversary earlier this year. And WVABLE is offered to the West Virginia resident through a partnership with the Ohio Stable program. WVABLE accounts provide financial independence for people with disabilities. The account is owned by the individual with a disability. They provide new investment opportunities that individuals didn't have before. So for example, they avoid having to spend down monies in order to stay below the $2,000 asset limit that is set by Social Security Administration and Medicaid. Individuals can now save for an emergency fund and for the long term. For example, we do have parents, we hear this a lot, they are concerned about what's going to happen to their child after they pass away. So WVABLE accounts allow for parents to start building a nest egg for their child to pay for expenses that occur now, but then also to ensure that their child will be taken care of financially for the long term. WVABLE accounts also provide tax benefits. So just like the 529 college savings plan, the interest that is earned on the investments grow tax-free. The earnings remain tax-free as long as ABLE funds are spent on qualified disability expenses. And then new as of 2019, there is a West Virginia state income tax deduction for all contributions made to the WVABLE account by the West Virginia resident and taxpayer, and that is dollar for dollar. So who is eligible? The requirements include the individual is a West Virginia resident. The onset of the disability would have had to have occurred prior to the age of 26. Now keep in mind, this does not mean that they would have to have been diagnosed by the age of 26. This would include the onset of the symptoms. Also, you do not have to open the account before age 26. And then one of the following criteria: the individual is eligible to receive SSI or SSDI due to the disability or blindness. So this does not mean you actually have to be receiving SSI. In other words, it simply means that the individual has received a disability determination by Social Security, or the condition is listed on Social Security Administration's list of compassionate allowances condition, or through self-certification. And what this means is that you have a written diagnosis by a physician of a physical or a mental impairment that causes marked and severe functional limitations, and the condition has lasted or is expected to last for at least a year. So this is the same standard that Social Security uses for disability determinations. So let's talk about enrollment. How do you enroll? So Tom provided us a walkthrough at our last workshop, and I just want folks to know that that recording is now available. But I want to mention that enrollment is done online. You start out at WVABLE.com. I also want to mention real quick, I just got off the phone with someone 30 minutes ago who actually thought they were at WVABLE.com, but somehow they landed at a site called Able Now. That is not West Virginia's plan, and it's just important for folks to know that there definitely is a difference. When you're at WVABLE.com, at the top of the page, you will see a tab, Open Account, and this takes you to Stable Account. Again, this is correct. This is WVABLE's partner plan. Now, it's relatively quick and easy to complete the enrollment. The slide reads about 20 minutes, but often it's less than that. There is a $25 minimum deposit that's required to open the account. That is not a fee, it just creates your opening balance. And as far as who completes the enrollment, the Federal ABLE Act requires that the person opening the account be either the individual with a disability or the beneficiary. Or if the individual is not able to open and manage the account, for example, if it's a child or an adult with a disability who is not able or willing to enroll and manage the account, then the Act allows for what's called an Authorized Legal Representative. And we often refer to this as an ALR. So this includes a parent, a guardian or conservator that's been approved by the courts, an agent acting under a power of attorney. So this can be anyone that's willing to serve in this capacity on behalf of the beneficiary, but the power of attorney is limited to the WVABLE account. And then be advised, for the individuals that act as an authorized legal representative, they will be formally assigned to the individual's account and will be the only person allowed to transact on the account. And then new as of October 2021, just last month, The following additional authorized representatives may establish the WVABLE account on behalf of the beneficiary. And this is as per the IRS final regs that were published in November of 2020. And then our WVABLE Act in the West Virginia Code was updated last month and signed by the governor. This now includes these additional individuals that is on the list, to include a spouse, a sibling, a grandparent, and a Social Security representative payee. So how do you fund your account? There are several ways. Again, Tom will be reviewing these in more detail, but I will briefly mention the options. So you can link a current checking or savings account, and you can make electronic funds transfers via EFT. You can mail a check to Stable Program Manager. A quick note, anytime you mail a check, you will need to complete and include a form that's titled Check Contribution, and that form is available at the Resources tab of WVABLE.com website. We also have envelopes that are addressed to Stable Account Program Manager. You can reach out to me and I mail those out quite frequently. You can also fund your account with payroll direct deposit. This is where payroll monies can be automatically deducted and deposited into the Stable account. This can be done by the beneficiary that is working, or the parent or a family member who wants to contribute a portion of their check on an ongoing basis. And we do have forms to get this set up at the Resources tab of WVABLE.com. And then Tom will also talk about an additional option in which you can set up what's called a gifting page within the online platform. As for the investment options, note that when the contribution is made into the Stable account, the beneficiary or the ALR, they will need to determine how these monies will be allocated across the investment options that are included in the plan. So also note, that we here at the Treasurer's Office, we cannot provide advice for selecting your investment options. However, we do have detailed information about the options included at the WVABLE.com website. And if you're at the home page and if you scroll to the very bottom, in the second column, you will see Savings and Investments. When you click on that, it takes you to a full page where the investment options, there's more detailed information provided about each. And then, of course, you can seek financial advice from a financial or investment advisor of your choosing. And as you can see on the slide, your investment options for the WVABLE Stable account include the Bank Safe option. So just like a savings account, the earnings are very low, but it is a 100% FDIC insured option where the principal is protected. And then we have 4 Vanguard mutual fund options that range from aggressive to conservative. So at the savings and investment page, you'll see a heading titled Performance. And there is a document that's included there, or a link to a document where you can actually review how these investment options have been performing since the inception of the program. And then the reminder is the benefit of the 529A account is you do not pay taxes on the earnings portion of the investments. So you have the money in your account, and now how do you spend it? So money in an ABLE account are available for use at any time to pay for qualified disability expenses. And the legislation has defined what qualifies as a disability-related expense, in that it must relate to the disability and it must maintain or improve the health, independence, or quality of life for the individual with a disability. Also note, the legislation is very broad in the interpretation of what qualifies, so there's not an actual list for the purpose that they did not want it to be restrictive. So I always like to suggest to people to think of it in terms of what would not qualify. So gifting the monies to a friend, gambling, tobacco, alcohol use, for example. Now, some examples of the categories for qualified disability expense include housing and rent, education, hiring a caregiver to help with transportation, food, basic living expenses, anything that benefits the child or the adult with a disability. Also note, When you do spend from the account, you want to make sure that you keep documentation of what the monies are being spent for, because the IRS does regulate this since it's allowing for tax-free earnings. So be sure to start an audit trail in case the IRS or even Social Security were to audit the records. So as for ways to make a withdrawal and get money out of your account, again, Tom is going to go into this in more detail, but I'll just say quickly that there's no fees and there's no limit set on making a withdrawal. And back to the checking or savings account, if you link that to make contributions, that is also a method of making withdrawals. And you can also make a withdrawal by requesting a third-party check. This is where the stable program manager would issue a check to either a third party, to the account holder, or to the ALR. And then there is a stable Visa debit card. And these are a very convenient method for individuals that plan to use the monies in the account more frequently, for example, to pay for daily living expenses. And then I want to review some important numbers and special considerations to keep in mind. So $25 is the amount of the minimum contribution in order to establish a WVABLE account. This amount creates the opening balance. And then how much does it cost to own a stable account? $3.25 is the monthly maintenance fee. So there is $9.75 that is billed quarterly. There is an asset-based fee on the investments options. So that is between 0.19 and 0.33% and applies only to the earnings portion of the investments. And then the maximum contribution amount into an ABLE account from any source is $15,000 per calendar year. So, and if the beneficiary is employed, he or she may contribute an additional $12,760 of their employment earnings. For the individual that receives SSI, it's important that they know that the Social Security Administration considers ABLE account balances that are over $100,000 as a resource. And then new as of 2019, there is a West Virginia state income tax deduction for all contributions made into the WVABLE account by the West Virginia resident and taxpayer. And then also effective 2019, when the account beneficiary passes, West Virginia Medicaid will not file a claim against the WVABLE account for any medical expenses that were paid out on behalf of the beneficiary. Now, this was standard internal policy, but now it is state law. And West Virginia was one of the first states in the country to pass this legislation in which there cannot be a Medicaid clawback. Now, the only exception is if the expenses were paid for the individual living in a nursing home or a community-based waiver program and is over the age of 55. And so that is as per the West Virginia Estate Recovery Program. So you can go to WVRecovery.com for more information. So now I want to turn this over to Tom. And you see on this slide contact information for both stable and WVABLE. And so you will get a copy of this PowerPoint so that you will have these numbers for reference. Stable account provides assistance for individuals that have opened an account and they have account related questions. Myself or anyone at the State Treasurer's Office, we don't have access to the accounts. So you definitely need to share this number with folks so that they know who to reach with their account related questions. Okay, Tom, I will turn it over to you to start the enrollment walkthrough, and let me unshare my screen here. Share. Okay. And I want to make sure that I've done that correctly.
Okay. Well, thank you, Roxanne, for that introduction. And I appreciate everyone being on with us today. I will reiterate one thing that Roxanne had mentioned, and that is, if you have not gone out and watched the previous webinar that we had done, please go ahead and find that and look at that. That will talk about the enrollment process. It will get you to the point at what we're at, that we're starting with today. So that brings you a little bit of context. Today we're going to look at after you've set up the account and you get into the online dashboard, what does that look like, and what are the things that are going to be options available to you. So we'll start where we had before, and that is here on the WVABLE website at WVABLE.com. And you'll notice here there are two spots up here at the top. There is a login button. By the way, right next to it is the button where you can open an account. So located conveniently right next to each other. So there's a login button here, and there's also a login button down here to the lower left side. Either one of these will get you to the page that you'll need to go to log in to the system. So once you've clicked on one of those, you'll come to this particular screen. And the one thing that I'll mention is you'll have your credentials, email address, and password. But I did highlight a box over here that I just wanted to mention real briefly. We do have the option to enroll in an account via a paper application. And that is available on the resource page at WVABLE.com. However, if you enroll via a paper application and then come here, you'll need to click on this link down here to create a password, to create your email address and the password you need to be able to get in to the system electronically after the paper enrollment form has been filled out. So I wanted to point that out as a resource. But once you fill in your email address that you set up during the enrollment and your password and go ahead and click sign in, you'll jump right into the system. The first screen that we come to is what we call the dashboard. I'm showing you kind of a unique one here because I want to talk about a few different options. So you'll notice on this dashboard, I have two accounts that are shown. If you only have one account, you'll just see the one account here. For example, this one that has Mitchell. But I showed it what it would look like if you have two accounts. If you had three accounts, there would be a third one underneath this one for Lorraine Hamilton and so forth. And it would just keep having those in order going down the screen if you were managing multiple accounts. So the first thing you'll notice with Mitchell's account, it has no funds in it at this point in time, but it is fully set up. And if you click anywhere on this open box or this arrow to the right, it will take you into the overview page, which we'll get to in just a second. But I also wanted to show you that if you get into this screen and you have what we show here, where you have a finish account setup button that's showing, then that means that there are some further steps to finish the enrollment process that need to be taken before it will allow you into the account. That finish account setup button will take you through a process that will ask you for goals, take you through the process of attaching a bank account, and will also ask you if you want to set up recurring contributions. Once that's done, and when you're setting up the bank account, it will ask you for that initial contribution amount, $25 or more, as was mentioned by Roxanne. And once you've finished all of that, you can come back in and it will let you into the dashboard, even though the money isn't quite there yet. If, however, you send in a check for the initial contribution, you'll have to wait until that check has been processed, invested in the account, and then this particular button at the bottom will disappear and you'll be able to get right into the accounts. Before we go to the overview page, I wanted to show you one additional thing on this screen, and that is if you wanted to add an account to your already existing selection of accounts here that you're managing, in this case, you're an authorized legal representative, then what you do is underneath the name section up here, you click on the drop down, and the second option down is to add an account. So when you click on that, it will take you back through the enrollment process, but only ask you questions related to the additional beneficiary. So, their demographic information, disability status and qualifications, so forth, where you want things mailed, and then it will add them in. And then, like we saw on the previous screen, they would be added in right below the existing account that you had. as a new account that you can manage. And that way, if you're doing multiple accounts, you have the single login, single password, and all of that can be managed from a single dashboard here. So once you've completed that and you clicked on the particular account you want to manage, then we go into the overview page. You'll see up here at the top left, you have this bar of menu options along the top. And the first one is overview, which has an underlined kind of reddish color to it. And so we refer to this as the overview page. On this page, you'll notice there are 6, I call them tiles, or 6 different sections of information. So this is a great place to always start because it gives you an overview, as it's called, of the account. The first tile is your balance, total balance, which here is showing up $1,100 for Mr. John Doe. Also realize that from this screen, we have 2 links down here to view activity or to make a transfer, and we'll go through each of those individual screens later, but you can get to them more quickly just by clicking on the link here. The next tile is your 2021 contributions. Obviously, this will change when the calendar year changes. And it shows you what the standard contribution limit is. For this year, it's $15,000. And what the able to work contribution limit is. This year, it's $12,760. The able to work is if the individual with a disability is employed and is contributing some of their employment income to the account. They can be tracked separately and they can contribute more money. You can actually click down here to learn more about able to work, but this is a good view into knowing how close you are to those limits in case you're contributing a lot or receiving a lot of gifts and maybe you're getting close to that limit. Anything over that limit that is contributed will automatically be rejected from the account and sent back to the person that tried to contribute. The next tile over is set a goal. You can do this through account setup or you can do it later. This is just, by adding a goal here at the bottom. This is an opportunity if you want to set a goal for how much you hope to be contributed to this account this year. We find obviously in financial and other industries that when individuals set a goal, they're more likely to, save more or be conscious of working towards that goal. And so in as far as that tool could be helpful in, encouraging somebody to put money in here and save, that tool is an option. The bottom left, you have the portfolio. And so this can be made up of whatever investment options chosen. Here we only chose the growth option, so it's only showing the growth option. If you happen to have chosen multiple, like let's say part of the money went into bank safe and part of it went into the growth option, it would show them as a combined portfolio here and what percentages are assigned to each of those portfolios. And you can click on the details down here to view details about those options. The next one over, you can add a gifting page. We'll get to this near the end of the webinar today, but we'll talk about how to add the gifting page and what its purpose is, and a link here to create that gifting page from this screen. The final one is using the prepaid card. So Roxanne had mentioned the stable card. It is a loadable debit card that we have an option for. So if you do not have one, we have a link down here that you can click on to sign up for the TrueLink card. TrueLink is the vendor that provides that particular card. If you did have a card, which is not shown here, then it would have a link that would direct you to funding the card that you could go to add money to the card. We'll actually show you at the very end of the presentation today a little bit more about this particular feature. But we'll start out by going over some of the menu options that we have here at the top and what those options allow you to do and a little bit more detail about how they function. So from the overview page, the next one we have is the activity page. And so when we click on the activity button, we have 4 options. We have summary, transactions, statements, and tax forms. Now on this particular webinar, I will not show you what the statements screen looks like or the tax form screen, but just know that this is where it's located. and statements are quarterly. So about 10 business days after the end of each quarter, that would be March 31st, June 30th, September 30th, and December 31st. So after about 10 business days after the end of each of those, the statement should be uploaded to the site and you will have access to them, and all historical statements should be there. I will mention presently, as of the recording of this webinar, for those that already have an account or have been in the account for a while, we are working on getting all the historical statements from our prior program vendor loaded onto the system, but they will be there. Tax forms similarly. There's 2 potential tax forms that you could have available. One of them is the 1099-QA, which deals with, and I always get these confused, it deals, I believe, with contributions into the account each year. And there's another one that's like a 5498 or something that's QA that deals with distributions or withdrawals from the account. Both of them, frankly, are informational tax forms. They really don't contain any information that would have to be filed on an annual income tax return, but they are required, and this is where you'll find statements and tax forms. But let's take a minute to go over the summary page and the transaction so we can understand that better. So on the summary page, and I've just kind of shown you here, this page is so long, I've actually broken it up into 2 slides here. Sorry that this is a little bit obscured, but account balance is the very first category. And you'll see that there are 2 options, the available balance and the total balance. Well, what's the difference between the 2? For the available balance, and I clicked on this little information icon to pop up this box. For the available balance, this is the balance available to you for use. It does not reflect pending contributions or contributions in a hold period. So I did this to highlight that we have these information buttons that will give you more information about what this category means. So these numbers could be the same or they could be different. So if you have a pending contribution, meaning the bank is in process of transferring the funds, or we do have some hold periods where once funds are received, they are not available to be withdrawn or spent for a certain number of days. So that would not be counted in available until that hold period has passed. So that's why these 2 numbers could be different. If you put money in there and just leave it there for a while, most likely these numbers would be the same. You also have this link to view all transactions. If you wanted to go to a full transaction history, which we'll actually show you in the next portion of this flow. I don't have any current activity to show, but if there was, it would show here. I also have a button to make a contribution. If I had any recurring activity, like a recurring monthly contribution, that would show up here. Or you could click on this link to set up a recurring monthly contribution. And monthly is the only time period in which recurring payments can be made. And if you would like to set one up from a bank account, for example, that it could be a great option to automate your contributing to the account. If you continue to flow down the screen, we have our year-to-date, obviously this year, 2021, contributions. So similar to the front screen page, it shows you your standard contributions, your able to work contributions, any withdrawals that have been made this year, any change in market value. So this is particularly applicable if you are invested in some of those Vanguard mutual funds. That market value will fluctuate with the stocks and bonds that are in them. So that would be reflected here. And then the final category is a current cost basis and earnings. So this gets more technical into investment jargon, if you will, or investment terminology. Cost basis is essentially the amount of money that you put into the investment, does not include earnings or fees or other things like that. And then the earnings are what you might think interest, dividends, other types of earnings that you would have on the account. And so those will be reflected here. Cost basis also becomes very important if somebody moves an account from a different state program to this program, or if they move money from a 529 college savings plan and move that into one of these accounts, then one of the things that will be provided in the information that we receive when we deposit the money is the difference between the cost and the earnings of the money coming in. And so those can be reflected in this section. So this is the overview on the transactions. If we wanted to go into this is a summary. If we want to go into the transactions themselves, we go to the second option down under that overview page of transactions and activity, and we'll show all transactions. These can be downloaded into various formats. I believe Excel is one, a CSV file is one. You can filter them. So if you have many months of history and you're looking for a particular month or a particular dollar amount, you can use the filter feature to find that really quickly. Here we have a couple transactions listed in June. This is a standard regular contribution of $100. We have an able to work contribution of $1,000. We have this plus sign here that if you clicked on that, it would expand the box and give you more detail about that contribution. I don't have that shown here, but it would give you more detail about that. So very good tracking. And by the way, similar to how you would in a normal bank account, if you initiate a contribution electronically from a personal bank account to this account, it will show up immediately on this transaction history, but down below will say pending, but it will still show up how much money and so forth, but it will just say pending until that is finalized. After that, we'll jump back out to our overview page real quick and show you that the next tab that we have is investments. This is another one that on this particular presentation, we're not going to go into that particular section of this site, but I will tell you it's not heavily used. What you would use this for would be if you want to sell out of the current investments you are in now and put them into a different investment type. By law, and this is at the federal level, you can only do that twice, 2 times per calendar year. So let's say you had all the money in growth and you think the stock market's gonna, do really bad and you want to sell it all and move it to bank safe, you would go into this investment screen and be able to do that. But I will point out as we go through the presentation, there are other ways to get money into other investment options without having to use this screen to sell them and move them into another option. If you want to move them completely, then this is the tab that you would need to go to. Again, many people just kind of put the money in and let it sit there for long term and don't really disturb it. And so this section is not necessarily used as often. If we go to the next tab over here, our transfers, you'll see that when we populate that, we have contributions, withdrawals, and manage. The manage, I'm not going to talk as much about in this one, but essentially that's where you can go to add an additional bank account or a bank account for the first time if you haven't added one. And then also we have a newer, a feature that's been brought back into our system. It was there previously and now it's back, where if you want to set up a check to be written from this account, which would be a withdrawal, written from this account and sent to what we call a third party. That can be a vendor, a landlord, somewhere that you want to pay a bill. Then under the Manage tab, you can go in and start creating profiles for each of those vendors, the vendor's name and address information, so that when you go in to create that check request, you select, a vendor that's already been established in the system, and then it pre-populates into the check their name as the payee and puts on the envelope their address and all of that. So all of that can be done through this manage screen. But what we really want to focus on is contributions and withdrawals. That's what most people use these accounts for, right? So if we go into the contribution screen, making a contribution. The first thing that you're going to see is this drop-down menu. Again, I'm not showing this currently on the screen, but when you click on this button here, it will drop down and it will show you all the options that have been set up for a contribution. Primarily, that's going to be whatever bank accounts you have attached. You can attach more than one bank account. There is no limit on how many bank accounts that you add. We very seldom see more than a couple, but you could. And so you select from what's been set up in the system, what bank account you want to transfer from. It could be a checking account, could be a savings account. Once you've selected that bank, you select, is this a one-time contribution or is this a recurring monthly contribution? So it gives you an option here to set up recurring if you haven't done so before. But if it's a one-time, you click there and click next. That will take you to the next screen. On this particular screen, you will identify whether it is a standard contribution from any source, or is this an able to work contribution from a source of employment earnings that the individual with a disability had. So you specify which one of these buckets that it goes into. Once you've selected that, you hit next here at the bottom. And we'll have one final screen before we review, and that screen is to select your investment options. It's going to default and show you what you already have set up in the account. So as we noted in the overview page when we first got in, the growth option is what was already set up in the account, and we have a total balance of $1,100 there. So if you want to continue putting the money into that same option, you populate the dollar amount, and you click review and you move to the next step. If instead you want to invest these new monies into a different option, then we have a button here to contribute to a new investment. So that's where you can add one of the other options or the bank safe. So as I mentioned before, previously with the investment screen, that screen allows you to sell out and move money from one investment to another. Here, you're contributing new monies, and this could be a way in which if you wanted to start funneling money into a different investment option, you can do it through contributions rather than just selling, in this case, the growth and moving it to something different. So over time, as you're contributing new funds, you could make that investment mix different just by selecting where you want your contributions to go. Once you've decided that, let's say in this case, you'll see when we go to the next screen, we put $100 in here, we click review, it now takes us to our review screen. So similar to what we looked at in review screens when we went through the enrollment, we have these little pencil icons here at the top or to the side. And if you want to change any of these categories, just simply click on the pencil icon and it will take you back into that step and you could change it. So if I wanted to change the bank account it was coming from, the frequency, that it was a standard contribution, or the investment option and the amount of money, I can click on any of these to change that. If everything looks good, I go ahead and click confirm and the order is submitted, and you'll see the big screen of green, which says you'll receive an email when your contribution is complete. They say within 2 to 7 business days. That's a very liberal time frame, partially to also include weekends because most money is not transferring over weekends. But in general sense, it's probably only going to take really 2 to 3 days if it's during the week for this type of transfer to be made. You also have the ability here to jump immediately to the activities tab where you'll see that contribution recorded and showing as pending. So now that we've looked at contributions, let's look at withdrawals. In this particular example, we're making a transfer to a bank checking account. I will also say here that if you have a stable card, that when you click on this drop-down menu, the card will also be one of the options to where you can transfer money to. Or if you're going to write a check, then one of the options will be to write a check. The particular screen I'm showing right now shows if we're moving money from this account back to a personal bank account. We select that account. We select which one of the investment options that we want the money to come from and how much. And then we can go ahead and click review. It does show you, by the way, underneath the investment option, how much is available to withdraw. Or it actually shows you how much is available in total, but how much you can make the withdrawal for. And that number is always going to be a little bit less. You can click on withdraw all funds if you wanted to just completely withdraw everything out of that investment option. But that amount may be a little bit less than what they said is available, because especially if you're invested in a mutual fund prices at the end of each day, and they don't sell until after it's priced that day. And so the chances of the amount of money in that mutual fund changing either positive or negative is going to be impacted. If you're in the bank safe, then whatever your available balance is, if you said withdrawal funds, that's pretty much assured the number that you're going to be able to withdraw out. But if you don't want to withdraw everything, just simply put in the dollar amount that you want to, click on review. That will take you to the next screen where it gives you a summary. Once again, you can click on your little pencil icon to change anything that you want to at this point. But if it looks good, you can click on withdraw money, and that transaction will be in process. And likewise, if you go back to the transaction screen, that withdrawal will be available and shown as pending. The final screen up here I wanted to point out is the settings screen. There are some important things to understand that are in settings in case you want to change those. So the first item is it shows you your account information. So your account number, which actually is hidden when you first get in. If you click on the little eyeball icon, it will show you that account number. It shows you all of the other information when the account was created. In this case, I was created prior to this conversion with our current manager, so it shows the date it was converted. The mailing address is hidden, but you can show that as well. I will say that the pencil icon on this one will only allow you to change the mailing address. No other information in here will be changed or be allowed to be changed. As you go down, you have the beneficiary information, name of the beneficiary. In this case, I had not populated what he identifies as, but if I clicked on the pencil icon, I could choose, he, she, the options that are available, and the residential address. The residential address also could be changed through using the pencil icon on that particular screen. I will also point out, when you go to that screen, it lets you know this, but if you make a change to the mailing address or the residential address, and then try to write a check that will be going to that new address, that check will not be sent for 30 days. So there's a 30-day hold placed on sending anything to that new address after it's been changed in the system. Going further down, you have bank accounts. This is also a location where you can add a new bank account if you don't have one or if you want to add an additional one. You can also add new bill pay recipients. We talked about this before under the one maintenance screen, but you can add your new bill pay recipients. Very handy. You go in and you add them so that they're already in the system. And then when you go to make that check payment, you just select which one you've already pre-set up, and it makes the time through that process much faster. You can change the yearly goal here that's shown on the overview page if you would like. And there's eligibility questions that were set up during the enrollment. You can actually, with the pencil icon, change any of these except the authorized legal representative relationship. That is currently not allowable to be changed. We're considering making that to be changeable so that when those new options that Roxanne had mentioned are available as far as spouse or sibling or grandparent or representative payee, that if somebody wanted to alter this to make it more accurate or to show something different, then they could do that. But currently that is not alterable. Anything else in this category could be changed with that particular pencil icon. So those are a lot of the different things that you can see in the settings. Two more things I want to cover, and then we'll open it up for some questions. So back to our overview page, I mentioned we had adding a gifting page. So there's a really great, unique way in which individuals can request people to give money to their account for special occasions. You think about birthdays or graduations or other celebratory circumstances where maybe they don't want to receive personally gifts of cash, and they can let people know, hey, why don't you just contribute directly to my account? So when you click on the Create Gifting page at the bottom, it actually comes out to this particular screen. You would click on the Get Started button, but it actually kind of shows you right here, which we'll see on the next page, a blown up version of this, what that gifting page looks like. You simply answer a few questions, what name you want it to show, and do you want to set up a yearly goal, and some questions like that. And then once those questions are answered, your page is created. And it's a little bit blurrier than I'd hoped, but this is essentially what the page looks like. And so when people come to this page, they can click on Make a Contribution, which will open up a secure link that gives them the ability to put in some banking information to make an electronic transfer to this account. If somebody wants to make a gift via check, we have a separate form that they can send in with the check attached, and it will be recorded in the system as a gift to this individual. And then they can be tracking their goals. You'll also notice here on the far right corner, you have Facebook, Twitter, and email. So these are easy ways in which if the person clicks on those icons, they will post a link directly to this page on each of those social media or an email that can be seen by people. And that link will take them directly to this contribution page. So if they have a Facebook account that they want to post it on, or Twitter, or you can create an email and then email it out to a large group of friends with some other message in the email, but it will populate a link, and when they click on the link, they come directly to this contribution page for Alex, where they can click on the contribution button and make that gift, which is great. The next final thing I want to talk about is signing up for the prepaid card, a great way to spend from the account. TrueLink is our partner with the card that we have. For those that are familiar with them, one of the premier vendors in the industry when it comes to individuals with disabilities. And if you don't have a card, you go ahead and click on the sign up for the TrueLink card. And when you do that, what it does is it takes you out to their site. So I wanted to show you what that looks like. So this is actually where the link would take you. It is a separate enrollment process with them. So you would select, I am an authorized legal representative, or I am the account beneficiary, and they'll go through and they'll ask you a few demographic information questions and get you set up with the card. Once the card then is finished and they send it out in the mail and you receive it, then going back one step, again, here on this screen, then they'll have a button that will say, load the card. It's just a quick link to get you to the withdrawal page, where you can select the card and the drop down in the withdrawal page to transfer money to that card, because it is loadable. So just wanted to show you that. One of the great things about the card is that it really has good record keeping to it. They have their own also dashboard site that you log into to manage the card. Maybe we can do that on a separate webinar, but for today, we just wanted to go through what the stable account dashboard looks like and the various options of what you can do in that. So with that being said, I will turn some time over to Roxanne again for any questions, and then potentially any other comments that she might have to kind of wrap up the webinar here.
This has been great, Tom. It is awesome to be able to have a visual for what the dashboard looks like, and then just to have an understanding of how to use those features. And if you want to go ahead and keep up your PowerPoint, just in case there's questions, I'm sorry, I'm switching it up on you. And any questions that we have, let me open the chat box here. Okay, so we do have, I set up an account in June, and it says there is a hold on the account. How do I find out about this, and why the money I used to open the account does not show there?
Okay, that can be a little bit more of a complex question. So holds can be placed on accounts for various reasons. And I'd probably have to dig into it more individually. So actually, I might ask Roxanne to take your name and information, and then I can even call you after the webinar and talk to you directly. Sometimes during the enrollment process, if the Know Your Customer questions weren't answered correctly, or you did too many attempts on that and so forth, there could be some ID verification pieces of documentation that they're looking for. Yeah, why the money wouldn't be in would be a whole nother interesting question. I guess if you set up, I'd have to ask the question, did you set up like an electronic bank transfer? Did you send in a check? You know, what method did you look at funding that account? So I'll definitely take that offline after the webinar and contact you directly. But definitely, you know, we're here to help. I am a direct support to Roxanne. And so if there's any questions like that you don't feel like you're getting direct answers from customer service or other things, just let us know and we can get involved to help you get those taken care of.
Yeah, so be sure that you do reach out to me. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, Tom, too, because anytime you're having those kinds of issues, you know, stable customer service line, you definitely want to reach out to them. And like Tom said, if you're not, you know, getting the answers maybe in a timely manner, or, you know, Tom is excellent to help. It's not uncommon that folks will reach out to me and then I reach out to Tom, and then, you know, we can help to get the matter resolved. So always make sure, you know, that stable account is here, and then of course myself and Tom to help. So definitely we'll follow up with you after this webinar, you know, to help figure out what's going on there with your issue. And then we have another question. Thanks for the presentation. If you are an ALR, how many accounts can you manage under your login?
Great question. The answer is there is no limit, is the technical answer. Obviously, you know, you want to make sure that you are in a position that you're qualified, you know, legally under the rules to be managing any number of accounts. I can tell you, maybe as a quick advertisement, or, you know, I can turn it over to Roxanne. We're going to be doing another part in the webinar series in a few weeks, talking about what we call an entity ALR process. So if you happen to be representing a company, an organization, whether it be for-profit or not for-profit, that you know, deals with a lot of individuals with disabilities, and that organization has the ability and the capacity to manage these accounts, then we have a lot of organizations that are like that will set up one underneath the organization's structural name and then manage many accounts under that structure. You can have individuals maybe with multiple guardianships that they are, you know, responsible for. Obviously, if you're a parent with, let's say, multiple children, there can be a number of scenarios, but the technical answer is there is no limit on the system as to how many you can add and manage. The largest one that I've ever heard of within our program is some organizations that have well over 100 accounts. I've heard of one recently that may have close to 200, but I also think that they have it broken up between like 4 different people in little subsections managing numbers of accounts each, because that gets pretty overwhelming.
And that was a great question. And one thing that I want to mention, actually, there's 2 things real quick, because I'm not seeing any additional questions, but if there are, please indeed include in the chat box. Tom had mentioned this, that the stable online platform, in my part of the presentation, I referenced that the IRS had released final regs. They've expanded the definition of an ALR to include a spouse, a grandparent, sibling, and the representative payee. So that is state law now. However, our stable online platform, it does not yet include those additional individuals. However, the goal for that, Tom, and you can kind of reference this too, is that they expect those to be added in December. So just want to make that clear that, you know, even though folks can, you know, those additional people can indeed establish accounts, they're not going to see, you know, that breakdown listed in the online platform just yet. So that will be in December. And the other piece is, we decided to offer this webinar series because we do have a new program manager administrator with Stable. And so prior to July, so many of you folks on the webinar today may know that. You might be familiar enough with Stable to where you're recognizing that there's a different look to the platform. So that's why we're doing the workshop series, is to allow folks to be able to first, understand the new enrollment platform. So those would be for new individuals, right? That wouldn't know that there was a difference necessarily. But now with the folks that have owned a ABLE account, and now there's this new online platform, today's webinar was to help assist you in knowing the features and what all of the functions look like and how to better use them. And so, Tom, I thought this was a great presentation. It's so helpful to see, the features, and then even to drive home some of the features that people may not have used even before. For example, that gifting page. We did have the e-gift option before. They've just changed it up a little bit, where it's actually a gifting page that creates a link. And we're actually seeing more people use that option now. And I think, too, I would attribute it to the fact that the dashboard looks different, and they actually have that as one of the options that's kind of front and center. So it brings attention to that. And then, of course, the debit cards, the prepaid debit card as an option, too. I always had received some calls about that before. People didn't understand, they thought the card came automatic, but they do have to request that. And I love that the option to request that is front and center on the online dashboard as well. And looks like we have some additional questions. You mentioned only changing your investment twice in a calendar year. Is that done through the dashboard? I may have missed the answer when discussing it.
The answer is yes. And again, this is specific to if you want to sell out of all or a portion of one investment and move it to another investment. So only that type of change, and by federal law, that can only be done 2 times per calendar year. So as I mentioned in the presentation, one way potentially around that is, as you're making new contributions, you can decide where you want those contributions to go. And so you can start putting them into a different investment option, if that's what you want to do, as a way to maybe put money into a different one than what it's currently invested in. But if you, probably the most common scenario would be if you think, the stock market's going to crash or something, and you're in an investment option that has stocks and bonds, you do have the ability to sell out and move it to maybe like a bank safe, something very conservative and safe, and you can do that twice per calendar year. And that would be in the investment section on that the top bar. You'd click on investments and it would take you into that screen.
That was a good question. And then another question, when a family member or a contributor does a gift to the account, do they have to create an account of some kind, entering a banking information, etc., or is it similar to an online purchase, such as continue as guest type of things when purchasing?
Yeah, it's similar to what you mentioned, like when you're purchasing something online. In this particular case, we do not accept contributions by credit card. So it would be asking for information that would relate to a bank account, kind of like you would when you're setting up a bank account in the system of your own, like a routing number and account number, so that it can electronically transfer from that account to this particular, stable account. So just understand, though, that yes, it's like the latter that was mentioned, but the information putting in would be actual banking information, because credit cards or those types of contribution methods are not acceptable.
Well, let me piggyback on that. And you may have mentioned this, Tom, and forgive me for missing that. Can you do a debit card contribution as a gift? Can you use it?
As long as you have the routing and account information from the bank that the debit card is attached to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So unlike an online purchase where you go in and you put your card number and the expiration date and some of that information, yeah, the system doesn't accept that. It actually would ask for, you know, the information that would connect directly to the account.
Okay, perfect.
But it
Right.
is done in a secure environment such that there's no worries about, you know,
Okay.
it being safe. So.
No, that makes sense. These are great questions. And just a couple reminders too, and I'm only mentioning this because these are the calls that we get here at WVABLE. You know, when individuals are mailing in a check contribution, whether that be for that initial contribution to establish the account, or if it's a check contribution, you know, thereafter, you do want to make sure that you include the check contribution form, and that form is available at the resources tab of our website. And then also there was an individual that I kind of helped to walk through, although Tom does a much better job at this than I ever would. She was wondering where her account number was listed. And so we reached out to Tom real quick, and he helped us on that. And of course, he did mention that during the training of where folks can find their account number, and that would be up in the settings and then the drop down. And so just as a little refresher there, yeah, he's showing that right now.
Yeah, right here. So under your account, under settings, and you have to click on the little eyeball icon to show it, but that's where you can find the full account number.
Okay, and then we have another question. I hate how long new web pages take to load. Any improvement of this expected? I also noticed that it was previously percentages for contributions. Now it is dollar amounts per option.
That is correct. So let me answer the first question first. As far as website load times, you know, that is going to vary depending on a variety of circumstances. I can say that I know as of recent, to your point, I know there's individuals who experienced a little bit of slower load times on this particular site. I think mostly that's happening for people who have many accounts that it's trying to populate, because they are managing many accounts. For singular accounts, or maybe you're managing one or two, it should be hopefully faster. I know there's some work going on currently by Someday in the background to see what they can do to make sure that's as fast as possible at all times. So there is some things in the works there with their IT and computer software team. On the second item, if I remember correctly, oh yes. So the second item, this system does do it slightly differently, where instead of presetting what investments you want the money deposited into each time that it's received, this one asks you each time where you want to invest the money. So pros and cons to both systems. This is the one that was in place for this particular program manager. I can tell you that for some forms, we can work around that. So for example, with a contribution form for payroll deduction from an employer, if an individual just simply wants to put in the box what asks for the dollar amount, you know, for what investment option, if they just want to put all, or, you know, something to that nature, you know, that they want all of the money that's contributed through payroll deduction to go to that particular investment option, that is acceptable. But yes, the way the system is set up now with the new vendor, if you make a contribution or withdrawal in the system, you will need to specify the dollar amount and which investment it's coming from or being contributed to.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. That was a difference that we noticed early on. And like Tom said, there's pros and cons to each method. So do we have any more questions? These were great questions. And Tom, thank you so much for all the detail and the great answers there. So Roy, I don't think I'm missing any. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And Tom, if you want to give me the controls, I will go ahead and share a couple slides before we close. Okay. There is one additional question that I will go ahead and ask Tom. Kind of a comment. They noticed in the emails confirming contributions, etc. I mean, it was somewhat confusing to them by how their name appears. She says, I realized it is explained by middle name.
Okay. Yeah, I think, you know, and I'm not a user of the system, and as far as getting emails as often as everyone else does, I think however the account was enrolled in, I believe the system tries to take, you know, a portion of that name and actually apply it to the email where it's saying dear so-and-so. So yeah, if you have any other comments or feedback for us, we're always looking to make improvements or enhancements to our system. So definitely let Roxanne know. She can send that on to me. I can send that on to our someday team and let them know that this is something that you know, we've received as some feedback that we can try to improve upon for sure. Definitely if the name is, you know, like it's drawing on the middle name versus the first name or something like that, depending on how the name was put into the enrollment system. We definitely enjoy feedback like that so that we can try to make it better and easier.
Okay, I just want to make sure that you all see the screen that I'm sharing. That's at the top. We're here to help customer service information. Is that what you're seeing?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So if we don't have any more questions, I just want to thank Tom. You're always incredibly generous, you know, to share your time and expertise regarding stable accounts and even troubleshooting issues when we get some different calls and requests. And today's session, your walkthrough was very informative. You know, it's always helpful, again, to be able to see what to expect with these online platforms and to understand the features and how to use them. And, you know, we thank everyone for attending today's webinar. We hope that this session will help you to easily navigate throughout the online platform and to be able to make transactions with ease. Any other questions, we're here to help. This number here, it comes directly to me. There's my email address. If it's something that I can't answer, you know, I'll reach out to Tom. Lucky Tom gets to hear from me quite frequently. And then stable account support. That is the number that you call, you know, if you have any questions. So anytime you have an initial issue, definitely reach out to Stable Account for assistance. That's what they are there for, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. Myself at the Treasurer's Office, we don't have access to the accounts. However, Stable Account support does. So if you get locked up in an account, you need to reestablish a username password, you need an account balance or to check on a contribution amount, for example, you can reach out to Stable at that number. I want to thank both Disability Rights of West Virginia and the West Virginia Developmental Disabilities Council for hosting today's session and our webinar series. And then also thanks to Roy Mallory with Disability Rights just for providing the help and the support behind the scenes and offering this webinar series and the recordings. And just a reminder to everyone that all the sessions of the webinar series are being recorded and will be posted to the resources tab of WVABLE.com website. We're also posting it at the upcoming events page of our WVABLE page. So all registered attendees will also receive a link to the recorded sessions as well as a copy of the PowerPoint slide deck. And then we hope to see you for our next workshop in the series that Tom had referenced earlier. The title is Expanding the Availability of Stable Accounts Through Organizations and Entities as Authorized Legal Representatives. So Tom and myself will be back as your presenters for the workshop. It is scheduled for Wednesday, November 17th from noon to 1 p.m. And the webinar is designed for the nonprofit or the for-profit business, agency, or organization that will serve as an entity authorized legal representative for multiple WVABLE accounts. So let me add, while the online platform and the enrollment that we held, a couple weeks ago, agencies can enroll and add multiple accounts that method, but this is a different method in which the account is linked to the entity as opposed to a single individual. So this workshop will include a brief overview of WVABLE program basics. will review the processes and the procedures necessary to designate an entity ALR. There will be a review of the methods for opening and managing new stable accounts, and then a review of the reporting features available to entity ALR. So that piece is a additional feature to entities through this method. And then, of course, we'll include time for question and answer. We will post this session to our Facebook page, so please feel free to share it so that we can get the word out to these entities and organizations about the training. So if there's not any additional questions, Tom, do you have any closing remarks?
No, it's just been a pleasure to be with you on this webinar today. And again, feel free to reach out to customer service with any questions. And if you're not getting the full responses there that you need, or have a particularly unique situation, go ahead and reach out to Roxanne. She can always pass it along to me, and we'd love to get your, whatever help that you need. We love the people that we serve. We know this is such a great benefit for those who it can be helpful for, and really hope that the features that are options that are presented here are things that can also be really useful, and not only saving funds for future use, but then being able to use them and spend them when the time comes appropriately to be able to use them. So just grateful to be on. Thank you.
Thanks again, Tom. This has been incredibly helpful. We're glad that all of you have joined us today. And if there's nothing else, everybody have a safe rest of your day and weekend ahead. And we look forward to seeing you at our next workshop. Have a great day, everyone.